Have you ever sat in a room full of people and still felt completely alone? Not the kind of alone that comes from being by yourself. The other kind. The kind where you're surrounded by voices and laughter and somehow none of it reaches you. Where you smile at the right moments and nod at the right times, and inside, you're somewhere else entirely, somewhere quiet, somewhere heavy, somewhere no one else can see. If that feeling is familiar to you, I want you to know something before this video goes any further. You are not broken for feeling this way. You are not weak. You are not the only one lying awake tonight wondering if anyone would notice the weight you're carrying if you finally set it down in front of them. Tonight, I want to tell you a story. It's not a story about anyone famous. It's not a story you've heard before. It's the kind of story that could be happening right now, in a house not far from yours, to someone who looks completely fine on the outside. And somewhere in this story, I think you're going to find a piece of yourself. His name was Marcus. He was 38 years old, and by almost every outside measure, his life looked successful. A good job. A nice apartment. A calendar so full that he rarely had a spare evening to himself. What no one around him knew was that the full calendar wasn't ambition. It was avoidance. Marcus had learned, somewhere in his 20s, that if he stayed busy enough, he never had to sit still long enough to feel the ache that lived underneath everything else he did. Work became a place to hide. Meetings became a reason to avoid dinner alone. Late nights at the office became easier than early nights at home, where the silence had a way of asking questions he didn't want to answer. The truth was, Marcus hadn't spoken to his younger brother in almost 6 years. It started with something small, an argument at their father's funeral about a decision neither of them can fully explain anymore. Words were said that couldn't be unsaid. Both of them, too proud and too hurt, walked away assuming the other would reach out first. Neither of them ever did. Have you ever let a small wound turn into a silence so long that you forgot exactly how it started, but you remember exactly how much it costs you every single day it continues? For 6 years, Marcus told himself he was fine. He told himself the distance between him and his brother was simply how things were now, an unfortunate but permanent fact of his life, like a scar he'd stopped noticing. But there were moments the silence broke through anyway. Every year on his brother's birthday, Marcus would open his phone, start typing a message, and delete it before sending. Every time he passed the diner they used to go to as kids, something in his chest would tighten just slightly. Every holiday season, when his friends talked about family dinners and inside jokes with siblings, Marcus would smile politely and change the subject. He built an entire life around a silence he never actually chose. He simply let it happen, the way people let so many painful things happen, not through one dramatic decision, but through 1,000 small moments of choosing not to reach out, until the distance became so wide it felt impossible to cross. If you have someone in your life like that right now, a person you miss more than you'll admit, separated from you by pride, or hurt, or simply time that got away from you, I want you to sit with that thought for a moment. Not to feel guilty. Just to notice it. Because noticing it is often the first step towards something changing. The turning point for Marcus didn't come from a grand realization. It came from something small and ordinary, the way most real turning points in life actually do. He was driving home late one night, exhausted from another week that had blurred into the next, when his phone rang. It was his mother. Her voice was different. Careful. The kind of careful that immediately tells you something is wrong before a single word explains why. She told him his brother had been in an accident. Nothing life-threatening, she said quickly, sensing his fear, but serious enough that he was in the hospital, and serious enough that the family had been called. Marcus doesn't remember much about the drive to the hospital. He remembers his hands shaking on the steering wheel. He remembers a strange, sick feeling settling into his stomach. Not just fear for his brother's safety, but a sudden, overwhelming awareness of everything he might lose without ever having said the things he needed to say. 6 years of silence suddenly felt unbearably small compared to the possibility of losing his brother without ever fixing it. Have you ever needed a moment of crisis to show you what actually mattered all along? Why does it so often take almost losing something for us to remember how much it means to us? Marcus arrived at the hospital just after midnight. The waiting room was fluorescent and quiet, filled with the particular kind of stillness that only exists in places where people are waiting for news they're afraid to hear. His brother was stable. Banged up, a broken wrist, a mild concussion, frightening, but not life-threatening, exactly as their mother had said. Relief washed over Marcus so intensely that his knees nearly gave out in the hallway. But relief quickly gave way to something else. A choice. He could walk into that hospital room, see that his brother was okay, offer a polite hello the way distant relatives sometimes do, and walk back out to his car, back to his apartment, back to the same silence that had defined the last 6 years. Or he could walk in and finally say the thing he had been avoiding for 6 years. He stood outside the door for almost 10 minutes. 10 minutes that felt like standing at the edge of something much bigger than a hospital room, the edge of a version of his life he had never let himself imagine. What would you have done, standing in that hallway? Is there a door in your own life right now that you've been standing outside of, afraid to open? Marcus opened the door. His brother was lying in the hospital bed, one arm in a cast, a small bandage above his eyebrow, looking smaller and more tired than Marcus remembered him. For a moment, neither of them said anything. Then his brother spoke first. His voice was rough, hoarse from exhaustion, but steady. "You came." "Of course I came," Marcus said, and his voice cracked in a way that surprised him. There was a long pause. The kind of pause where 6 years of unspoken things hang silently in the air, waiting to see which direction the conversation will go. Then Marcus said the words he had rehearsed 100 times in his head over the years but never once said out loud. "I'm sorry. I don't even fully remember what we were fighting about anymore. I just know I missed you every single day, and I was too proud to say it." His brother's eyes filled with tears, and for a moment, so did Marcus's. Not because everything was suddenly fixed. Not because 6 years of distance disappeared in a single sentence. But because something that had felt permanently broken had finally been given the chance to begin healing. His brother reached out with his good hand, and Marcus took it, and the two of them sat there in that quiet hospital room, not saying much else, simply present with each other in a way they hadn't been in 6 long years. In the months that followed, Marcus's relationship with his brother didn't repair itself instantly. 6 years of distance doesn't dissolve in one hospital room conversation. But it began. Slowly, carefully, one phone call and one dinner at a time, they started rebuilding what pride and hurt had almost destroyed permanently. But something else changed in Marcus too, something he didn't expect. He realized that the silence he had built around his brother was the same silence he had built around almost every difficult feeling in his life. He had spent years avoiding pain by staying busy, avoiding vulnerability by staying guarded, avoiding the risk of being hurt again by simply never letting anyone close enough to hurt him. Standing in that hospital hallway, Marcus had learned something he had never fully understood before, that the things we're most afraid to face are usually the exact things we most need to face. That the silence we think is protecting us is often the very thing keeping us from healing. Is there a silence in your own life right now, with a person, or maybe just with yourself, that has quietly cost you more than you've let yourself admit? I didn't tell you Marcus's story because it's unusual. I told you because so many of you are living some version of it right now. Maybe your silence isn't with a sibling. Maybe it's with yourself, a version of you that you've been avoiding for years, burying under work, distraction, or exhaustion. Maybe it's with a version of your own past that you've never made peace with. Maybe it's guilt over a mistake you've never forgiven yourself for, even though everyone around you moved on from it a long time ago. Here's what I want you to understand tonight, as clearly as I can say it. You are allowed to stop carrying whatever you've been carrying alone. You are allowed to open the door you've been standing outside of. You are allowed to say the thing you've rehearsed 100 times but never said out loud. And more than anything else, I want you to know this: you are worth showing up for. Not because of what you've accomplished. Not because you've earned it through years of being good enough. Simply because you exist, and that alone makes you worth loving, worth forgiving, and worth the effort of finally setting something down that you've carried for far too long. If any part of Marcus's story felt a little too familiar tonight, if there's a silence in your own life you've been avoiding, or a version of yourself you've been too afraid to forgive, I'd love to know. You're welcome to share it in the comments below, even just a few words. Sometimes putting a feeling into words is the first step toward finally letting it go. If this message reached something in you tonight, a like helps more people find it. People who might need to hear exactly this, on exactly the night they needed it most. And if you want more honest, hopeful stories like this one, you're welcome to stay close for what comes next. Not because you owe anything to this channel, but because healing is easier when we don't walk through it completely alone. You are not as alone as tonight has felt. And whatever you've been carrying, you don't have to carry it forever.